I'm going to redo this recording on making better use of the Bootstrap Grid system than the scaffolded controllers do initially as we create our project. This is something we talked about before, but for the second time now, YouTube has taken down the video. I'll get to the reasons why in a few minutes, but for now, let's just talk about the grid system a bit more. We're going to take it a bit further than we did in our last discussion of it anyway. But just recall this before we go on. We have a number of options in our approach. You don't always need to specify specific values, but we do have these options here for default breakpoints, right? So depending on the screen size, we have these different, from extra small right up through to extra, extra large, these different breakpoints. And we can use that as we define the different column layouts that we're going to use, right? So with that in mind, let me come back here. This is my patient create. Might as well talk for a moment about why the videos have been taken down off YouTube. When I did this demonstration last time, I used the edit view. And of course, with our seeded data, we were randomly generating values for things like phone numbers and email addresses. Well, the complaint by YouTube was that in my video, I played with the edit view and it was showing that information, the phone number, email address, and it marked that as being a dangerous intrusion into someone else's privacy, right? In other words, that's the kind of thing people post if they're making negative comments about somebody sharing their email address and so on. So just to be safe, it said, nope, we're not going to allow that. Now, of course, you and I both know that the actual data values are totally randomly generated in our seed data. But it seems hard to get YouTube to understand that. So I'm just going to use the create view instead of the edit view for many of my demonstrations now, so I don't run into that same issue. Long story short, so let's just review again our arrangement here. Now, this is also another chance to talk about, this is how the view is originally created, scaffolded, I should say, by Visual Studio itself. And one of the first things I always do, let me even bring over here, this is something we did talk about before, okay? One of the first thing I do is move the entire row, okay, inside of the opening and closing form tags, right? Because right now the form tag starts inside the row. And I find that, especially if I'm going to eventually maybe create multiple rows and things like that, I'm less likely to get mixed up if I do this simple thing first. I'm going to put the opening form tag above the row. Now, of course, it's going to underline until I come down here because the form is out of sync with these divs, the closing div. So I'll cut that and paste it in down here. Okay. Now, we did the whole thing about Control KD to fix the indentation, but I'm also going to do this. I'm going to move the form group here. Almost all of our other form groups, our inputs, okay, are basically take the same screen height. But this one, dynamically, as more and more options to check off get added to the system, it's going to grow taller and taller. As a rule of thumb, I've actually usually found it's best to have this underneath or at the bottom of all the other columns. So this form group, starting here, going right down to there, I'm going to just cut it for a second. And while it's cut, this is a perfect opportunity to use my Control KD. There we go. And it just fixed my indentation, right? So I'll just come down here under the last one, but before the submit button, and I'm going to paste, okay, our checkboxes there, right? That just rearrange things a little bit. Okay. All right, well, that's good enough for now. Now, one other thing, okay, I'm going to also move, okay, the submit button, right? I like to move it outside of the row itself, put it in its own row. So let me grab the submit button itself. I'm going to cut it out, okay, and basically, now, of course, I can just double check here. Here's the start of the row. There's my dotted line. I can follow that right down, okay? So after the row containing all of my inputs, here is where I'm going to put in, I will define it in its own row. I find that's a good practice. So I have a little more code than I just took out. Okay, basically, we just had the form group. So I threw it into a row, and I've even given it here a class for the column, giving it half the screen, even though it's not really necessary because they're just going to be left aligned anyway. But here's my form group with my submit button. So I've just rearranged that so far. So let's just see the effect, the change so far as I run this. Okay, so I'm up and running. So if I come into Patients, click Create, can I see any difference? Actually, no, other than this is now at the bottom of the column, right? But our point is really that we have all this unused space over here in the right-hand part of the screen because everything is in one vertical column okay, taking up a third of the screen space that we have available, right? Actually, I'll stop running for now. Okay, let me just point out how that's working here. We talked about the column system. So remember we have 12 columns in any logical row, right? And so we're saying, hey, on medium and above screens, we'll use 4 of the 12 columns, okay, for all of these inputs. It's all in the single column all the way down. Then now we're starting a new row with our submit button below, right? Which is good because it means that it's not going to be over on the right-hand side later on. It'll always be below all the inputs. Okay, so what could we do? Well, one thing we could do is let's change it just at least to 6, right? And if I could have left it running and just done a hot reload, but I'll just run it again here now. Okay, so if I come to create, there we go. So now it's given it more width. So what we want to do is we're going to actually take part of this and move it up to this blank area. So I can actually do that here while we're running and just do a hot reload. So what I'm going to do is come down. We got about a dozen inputs here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, expecting maybe after that one. Well, I might go one more, the phone, right? So after the phone, I'm going to put in, okay, basically, I'm going to end that div, and I'll start, yeah, there. I'm going to start a new div, but in this div, I'll again go my class to, if it's medium and above, sorry, I copied and pasted wrong there. Anyway, so I'm ending, okay, with this div to slash end my column, right? And I'm starting a new column with the same MD6. Medium and above, it'll be 6, right? So let's just see. I'll just quickly save, do a hot reload, and then bringing up the view. Okay, there you go. So you see now all of this is over here. My save button is in a separate row, so it's always going to be below. If I hadn't moved it, it would have been underneath these checkboxes here. All right, but as my screen gets smaller, narrower, if I get down below the medium, then everything will go vertical, right? And that's perfectly fine. So on a small screen, okay, that's exactly what you want. We even get down to the point where the menu turns into a drop-down menu instead of being across the screen, right? As soon as we get above, okay, then it'll use half each for each column. Okay, so that's basically as far as I went in my last demo. But you know what? What if we want it to be even more dynamic? Okay, what if we want to create 3 columns? Because these are pretty wide. On a big screen, let's have 3 columns. But then as the screen gets smaller, okay, we'll want to go down to 2 columns, right? And eventually it'll go down to 1, right? Well, we can do that as well. I'm going to stop running. All right. So what's involved in making that adjustment? Well, basically, okay, we're defining basically one column of width 6, that's half the screen size, and then a second column of width 6 as we go down through, right? And that's okay, but what we're going to do instead is we're going to specify each form group's behavior instead of wrapping that in the column. So in fact, you might be surprised at this, but I can actually even get rid of these column tags themselves, okay? So I'm just going to actually get rid of all of them. And this is the closing div for that, okay? All right. So what are we going to do next? Okay, what I'm going to do, well, one other thing that I'm going to take advantage of is I can go like this to specify a gutter of 3, right? Just to always make sure that as it's resizing multiple times that we always have a gutter or some white space between the input controls. All right. So now each of these form groups, what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace it, okay, with one that includes 2 designations for columns, right? So let me just highlight that, go Control H. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace it. You'll see it after I do, okay? Just in the current document. I'll do that one at a time to make sure I'm not doing something I don't want to. But basically, each one of these all the way down to here and here, okay? Now, this one I'll skip. I don't want to necessarily do that one. All right, that's fine on its own. It's in its own row. So what have we done here to all of these? Well, basically, each form group then, might as well start at the top. Okay, we specified MD, medium and above, will give the form group 6 of the width of 12, right? Ooh, if we're on an extra large or above screen, we're going to give 4. Well, if you give 4 to each form group, right, then there's 12 in total. That'll be 3 across, okay? And that's a very disciplined arrangement. Let's just see what that looks like then as we actually run the application. Shouldn't take too long for it to come up. So I've come here to patient create new. There you go. And you see now on a full-size screen, right, we have 3 columns, okay? We're using less of the vertical space. We're taking more advantage of the width because we really don't need, okay, anything wider than what's here. But as we shrink down, so to speak, the width of the view that we have, coming down, see, it keeps resizing in different breakpoints. But eventually, as we go from large down to medium, okay, extra large down to large, technically it is, then we are down to 6. And it'll stay at 6 till we get down below medium. When we get below medium, okay, to small or extra small, right, then everything goes completely vertically. So it's up to you, right? There's lots you can do just playing around. So my bottom line is I really encourage you, okay, read through all the documentation here on how the grid system works, right? There's a lot of options for automatically, setting column widths, variable width columns, and so on and so forth, making it responsive and stacking horizontal and so on. So yeah, there's lots to be learned. It's a shame I don't have time to try and teach everything in class, but there you go.